Our architecture does not support this. This is a common line you must have heard engineers tell their product counterparts. This and similar lines can trigger debates, which sometimes could be unhealthy among product and engineering. So in this video, we discuss how to approach this and similar common situations both from product perspective and engineering perspective to ultimately foster healthier debates and achieve a better end result overall. So what we'll cover, first, obviously the line that you clicked this video for, our architecture does not support this. But also, is this really a P0 is another common line. Or let's make this a fast follow, and this is both for product and engineering. Sometimes product would ask engineering, let's make it a fast follow, or vice versa. And finally, who makes the final call if you really can't agree? So let's get right into the first one. So our architecture doesn't support this. So from a product perspective, when you hear this as a product owner, perhaps you bring a feature to an engineering team and then the engineering team tells you the architecture doesn't support this. So how do you think about this from a product perspective? So first is the architecture doesn't support it yet. That's really what they're, that's how you should take this, right? Don't take it as, they don't want to build it or they're resistive, even if they are, but just take it as, okay, the architecture does not support it yet. So therefore, this is basically the engineering team telling me that this is going to be expensive. It's going to be costly to build. So I first need to make sure, is it really worth it? Is it really worth the investment that the engineering team is going to make to build this new feature, right? So also help engineering understand why this is a meaningful customer problem. So you also have to have conviction on your own, but when you do, also help them understand why this is important for the customers, because ultimately both of you are trying to build a product that will appease the customers. And get data, which you need anyway to convince yourself, but use that data, use facts to present to the engineering team why this is an important feature or an important problem to solve. And that data can be obtained with experiments or customer anecdotes and so on. And then from an engineering perspective, like when you find yourself telling your product counterparts, our architecture doesn't support it, do remember that, technology is there to serve a function or a business. It does not exist in a vacuum. So don't try to kind of guard your cool architecture or whatever, just because, right? Remember that architecture or those functionalities exist to solve a customer problem, and product helps understand customer problems and define what to build. So partner up with them. And it's software, so technically you can build anything. It's just what should you build, and therefore you need data to justify the investments, right? So that's what product will help you get. Like, okay, is this really a worthwhile problem to solve, a worthwhile feature? And if that means that you need to change your architecture, so be it. At the same time, also work with product to find other ways to solve the problem that perhaps are easier to support. So maybe there's a customer problem and product suggests that you build this X feature to support it, but maybe there's another way to do it that still solves the problem, right? So work with product to maybe like understand the shape of customer behavior or understand different types of data to come up with a solution. So a few examples here. Let's say you have a streaming app or a music app where, customers can buy different songs. And so let's say the architecture of loading your homepage works by first finding out all the songs and then making network calls to populate the songs of each detail, right? So let's say product asks you, okay, well, we want to put against each song whether the customer owns it or not. So because of that architecture, you're going to have to make like maybe thousands or hundreds of calls because there's hundreds of songs on your homepage to know whether the customer owns each song. And that's something that just the architecture doesn't support. It's going to be expensive. You're going to incur a lot of latency. But what if you understood the customer behavior saying, okay, well, we know that maybe 99% of customers own less than 10 songs. So what if we just figure out what songs the customer owns first, and then as we load our homepage songs, we just do an intersection and in-memory computation, right? That's much easier to do than to go check for each song whether the customer owns it. So By partnering up with product and changing the way you look at the problem, you can come up with creative solutions. The next common thing that we hear is maybe, again, as product, you define some requirements and the engineering team is like, okay, well, is this requirement really a P0? Like, is it necessary for us to develop this, for us to launch this product? And so from a product perspective, you might think like, oh, the engineering team just doesn't want to build what I want. And, so instead of getting defensive, think of this as a way to receive feedback. So this is basically your engineering team kind of making sure that this is actually necessary for the customer. And so be open, first of all, that it may not be a P0. And then also remember that you succeed as a product leader if your engineering counterpart is also able to advocate for your P0. So understand that this exercise of, is this really a P0, and coming to a common understanding will eventually help you get a partner in advocating for your P0s, right? So think of it that way so you don't approach this negatively. And so some of the questions to ask yourself when you get asked this is, can the product stand on its own without this feature, right? So if this feature is not necessary for the product to stand on its own, then maybe it's not a P0. Secondly, can the product solve the customer problem without causing the customer cognitive load or complaints without this feature? So if you didn't build this feature, would the customer still have their problem solved? Maybe it's not all of the XYZ features, but does their pain point and problem still get solved in a way where they don't have to incur cognitive load or complain about the product, right? And if the answer is yes, then maybe, it's not a P0. So remember, avoid getting too attached to the product and, trying to make a cool product that you kind of conceive, right? So the focus should be on the customer. So remember that you're building for the customer and the focus should be on the customer. And so one thing to avoid is adding more P0s just because some will be chopped off. So don't do that. You'll lose trust and credibility. Make your P0s true P0s and work with your engineering team based on the framework. So the next common phrase is, let's make this a fast follow, right? So from a product perspective, maybe your engineering counterparts tell you, okay, well, what if we make this feature a fast follow? And so this is basically very similar to P0. So if it's not a P0, it's a fast follow and can be a P1, right? So apply the same heuristics to know whether something is a P0. And then fast follows sometimes can often get lost in the void, right? Maybe we don't ever get to them. And just learn to accept that maybe that's okay, right? Prioritize based on the value it provides to the customer. And so once you launch the product, the P0 that can stand on its own and solve a problem, then you ask yourself, okay, what will the next increment solve? And prioritize that based on the value it provides. And then avoid making things fast follows just to hit a date, right? So let's say you're trying to hit, like, let's say a July 15 date, and you can't hit this 3 features. Don't make those 3 fast follows just so you can hit the date, right? So make sure what you launch, what you ship is actually useful for the customer and the success of the product or the business, and it actually solves their problem without making them complain, right? That's the end goal. And so if needed, feel free to push out the date, but don't make things which are critical fast follows just so you can hit the date. And then from an engineering perspective, also sometimes our product counterparts will tell you, okay, let's make this a fast follow. Like maybe you have some unit tests or integration tests that you say that, okay, these can be done later. But here you need to remember that if things are actually critical for you to maintain your software and to preserve the customer experience, to preserve the scale in a healthy way, then don't mention those things as negotiable. Don't mention those things as things that can be fast followed. Like make them part of your estimate and just say we need to do it in order to achieve this feature. So if there's something that is absolutely critical, make sure it's part of the thing that you launch, right? Don't put it up for negotiation because only engineering understands those things. But then at the same time, be balanced. Make sure it's actually critical to the customer experience and to maintain the feature and the scalability of the feature. If it's not actually critical, then, be honest and candid, saying, okay, this can actually be a fast follow. So don't use this just to make everything not fast follow, right? So be honest with yourself, but at the same time, things that are really critical, such as basic testing, should be not up for negotiation to make it fast follows. And so the next thing is, okay, who makes the final call? Let's say you're debating, your conflict, you can't agree on something. Who makes the final call? Like, who makes the final decision? And so one thing to remember is, like, in every decision making, bring people along. Don't force something on them. Brainstorm, collaborate, and make sure that you're coming to a decision together, right? And so it's not just one person who'll say, okay, I'm the tiebreaker. Always kind of be collaborative and bring people along. And then, if you really can't decide, someone has to be accountable and take responsibility if something fails, right? So that person can just step up. Okay, well, we can't agree. We're going to go this way, and if it fails, I'll take responsibility, and that takes pressure off other people. If someone steps up and takes responsibility for failure, the group will agree and go with that direction. And in a lot of these situations, remember, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just pick one and then commit to it as a group. And to really answer the question, who makes the final call, it's the customer focus really that should derive the final call, right? It's not product or it's not engineering, but it's about the customer problem that you're trying to solve and what your product's purpose is. And so sometimes you may find, engineering leaders are a stronger voice for the customer. Sometimes you find that product leaders are a stronger voice. And so really, like, the customer focused arguments would never lose. And that's what all of us should use to make the final call. And so to conclude this, remember that magic happens when product and engineering work together, because both of these are non-overlapping skill sets from different perspectives. Like, even if you become a perfect, really good engineer, you may be working with a product counterpart who has skills that you'll never develop. Like, it's just not something that you'll ever develop, and vice versa. And so because the skill sets are non-overlapping, you can bring to the table different perspectives and skills to solve the problem in a way that individually none of you could solve. And so engineering provides directness and honesty and helps product grow and get real feedback. So they just directly tell you if something's going to be expensive. And so then it really pushes you as product to make sure that you're making very data-driven and customer-focused decisions. And product basically pushes boundaries and resistance to change on the engineering side. So they advocate for the customer, and they help engineering be purposeful, not just build things because they look cool. And so as a result of this, we get magical outcomes and end results as a result of healthy collaboration among product and engineering. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.